A dirty black dog like you. Just looking at you makes my skin crawl.
Captain Vince Dutton grabbed Grace Sullivan's wrist in front of 300 guests at the biggest charity gala in Washington, D.C. And the black waitress being treated like an animal in between.
Let go of me. I have a badge.
Shut your mouth! That bracelet costs more than your whole life.
Click. Handcuffs.
Who'd you take it from?
It was my mother's.
Her mother's gold bracelet crushed under cold steel. 300 powerful people watched a police captain cuff a waitress for looking suspicious. Not one said a word. Then the ballroom doors opened. A man walked in. His eyes found Grace, wrists bound, standing in the center of that room. His fist tightened. Dutton didn't even glance at the door. He had no idea that everything he'd built over 24 years was already over. Crazy, right? But wait, rewind 2 hours. This is where it all started. 2 hours earlier, Grace Sullivan walked through the service entrance of the Meridian Grand Hotel, carrying a pressed uniform in a garment bag and a constitutional law textbook in her backpack. She was 28 years old, third-year law student at Georgetown, Dean's List 3 semesters running, and tonight she was serving champagne to people who spent more on a single table than she earned in a year. The 12th Annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was the kind of event where senators traded favors between courses and lobbyists wrote six-figure checks before dessert. Every table cost $25,000. The guest list read like a who's who of Washington power. And the catering crew, Grace's crew, entered through the back. She didn't mind. She'd been picking up shifts with prestige events for 2 years now. Good money, flexible hours, and it kept her out of her father's wallet. That mattered to her more than anything. He'd offered to pay for law school 100 times. She'd refused 101. Her father had earned everything he had the hard way. She intended to do the same. In the kitchen, Raymond Brooks, everyone called him Ray, was already barking orders at the line cooks. Ray was 63, built like a retired linebacker, and had been the head chef at prestige events for 19 years. He'd known Grace since she was 9 years old, watched her grow up, watched her lose her mother, watched her turn that grief into fuel. Baby girl. He spotted her tying her apron. You look just like your mama tonight. Grace touched the gold bracelet on her wrist. Thin, delicate, the only piece of jewelry she ever wore. Her mother had worn it every single day until the day she couldn't anymore. She would have hated this gala, Grace said. Too many politicians. Ray laughed. She would have hated the appetizers, too. Stuffed mushrooms. Your mama thought mushrooms were the devil's vegetable. Grace smiled. It was the kind of smile that hurt a little, the kind that comes from remembering someone who should still be here. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced at the screen. Her expression softened. She silenced it and slipped it back without answering. You not going to get that? Ray asked. Later. I'm working. Ray shook his head. Stubborn. Just like him. Grace didn't respond. She picked up her tray, straightened her shoulders, and walked into the ballroom. The contrast hit immediately. Service hallway. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, the smell of industrial cleaner. Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed columns, a 40-foot ceiling draped in silk banners. Women in gowns that cost more than a semester's tuition. Men in tuxedos, with watches worth more than Grace's car. She moved through the room the way she always did. Invisible, efficient, professional. A tray of champagne flutes balanced on her left hand. A polite smile for every guest. Eye contact with no one. That was the trick to this job. You serve. You disappear. You don't exist unless someone needs a refill. Grace was good at it. Maybe too good.
Elena Whitfield, the gala's event coordinator, rushed past with a clipboard and a look of permanent panic. She stopped briefly to adjust a centerpiece on the VIP table near the stage. The table was empty. A gold placard sat in the center. Keynote speaker. "He's never late," Elena muttered to her assistant. "Why hasn't he confirmed arrival?" Her assistant shrugged. Elena checked her phone again and moved on. The empty table sat there like a held breath. Nobody noticed it. Not yet. At exactly 7:15, Captain Vince Dutton walked into the ballroom like he owned the building. He was 52, broad shoulders, dress uniform pressed sharp enough to cut paper. 24 years on the Metro Police Force, head of the Special Events Division for the last 6. He shook hands with a congressman near the entrance, clapped a deputy chief on the back, laughed at a joke that probably wasn't funny. Dutton loved these galas. Not for the cause, not for the food. He loved them because in this room, he wasn't just a cop. He was the authority, the gatekeeper, the man who decided who belonged and who didn't. He positioned himself near the main entrance and scanned the crowd. His eyes moved from face to face, table to table, not looking for threats, looking for something else. He found it in 7 seconds. Grace, carrying a tray across the dance floor. Black uniform, gold bracelet, moving with quiet confidence through a sea of white gowns and white faces. Dutton's eyes locked on her. He tracked her across the room the way a dog tracks a rabbit. Something tightened in his jaw. He leaned toward his partner, Officer Trent Calloway. Calloway was 26, new to the division, still believed the badge meant something pure. "That one," Dutton said. "The girl with the tray. Keep your eyes on her." Calloway looked at Grace. He saw a woman doing her job. "She's catering staff captain. I know what she is. Just watch her." Calloway's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but something cold settled in his stomach. He'd heard Dutton talk like this before, about the parking attendant at the governor's reception, about the coat check girl at the opera fundraiser. Always the same tone, always the same target. He pulled out his phone and pretended to check a message. His hands weren't steady. Across the ballroom, Grace set down a fresh tray and paused for a moment near the kitchen pass-through. Ray caught her eye through the window and gave her a thumbs up. She gave him a small nod back. Then her phone buzzed again. Same caller. She looked at it for a long moment this time. Something crossed her face. Warmth, mixed with something heavier. She silenced it again. On the other side of the room, Elena Whitfield checked the empty VIP table one more time. She straightened the keynote speaker placard. She smoothed the tablecloth. She looked at her watch. Then she looked across the ballroom at Grace Sullivan, carrying champagne through a crowd that didn't see her. Elena didn't know it yet, but she was looking at the keynote speaker's daughter. And the night was just getting started. It started with a credential check. That was all it took. 30 minutes into the gala, Grace was serving champagne to a cluster of donors near table 4. She poured with her right hand, balanced the tray with her left, smiled when smiled at, disappeared when not needed. She was turning back toward the kitchen when a body stepped directly into her path. Captain Dutton, feet planted, arms crossed, badge catching the chandelier light. He didn't introduce himself, didn't say, "Excuse me." He looked at her the way a man looks at something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Credentials. Now. Grace kept her voice even. My badge is right here, Captain. She turned her lapel so he could see the Prestige Events ID clipped to her uniform. Photo, name, company logo, everything in order. Dutton took the badge, held it up, squinted at it like it was written in a language he didn't trust. He turned it over, ran his thumb across the plastic. Then he dropped it back against her chest without a word. I'll be watching you, he said. Every move. He walked away. Grace stood still for 3 seconds. Then she picked up her tray and went back to work. Her hand trembled once. Just once. She pressed it flat against the tray until it stopped. Ray saw it from the kitchen pass-through. His grip tightened around his spatula. The cook next to him put a hand on his arm. Don't, he whispered. Not here. Ray didn't move, but his eyes never left Dutton. 45 seconds later, it happened. A white server, mid-20s, blonde hair, new to the crew, tripped near the senator's table. A full glass of red wine hit the white tablecloth. Then the floor. Glass everywhere. Wine splattered across the senator's wife's ivory dress. She gasped. The server stammered an apology. Dutton was 15 feet away. He looked over, shrugged, looked away. No credential check, no interrogation, no, I'll be watching you. Nothing. Grace saw it. The donors at table 4 saw it. Councilwoman Patricia Moore, seated 3 tables away, saw it. She'd been watching Dutton since the credential check. Now she pulled out her phone and started recording. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But her thumb hit record and stayed there. The contrast was surgical. A black woman with perfect credentials gets stopped, searched, and threatened. A white man shatters a glass on a senator's wife and gets a shrug. Same room, same uniform, same job. Different skin. That was the system working exactly as designed. Dutton returned to his post near the entrance. He pulled out his radio and keyed the mic. His voice was low, but clear enough for Calloway to hear every word. Run a background check on the Sullivan girl. Catering badge says Prestige Events. Something about her doesn't sit right. I want to know everything. Calloway's stomach dropped. He'd watched the credential check. He'd watched Dutton ignore the white server. He knew exactly what this was. But Dutton was his commanding officer. 24 years on the force versus his 18 months. Copy that, Calloway said. He hated the way those words tasted. The name Sullivan entered the system. It traveled through the department database at the speed of light, and somewhere in that database it connected to another Sullivan. Same last name. Same address on file. A Sullivan with a title that outranked every badge in the building. But that result wouldn't come back for another 40 minutes. And in 40 minutes, Dutton would have already crossed every line that mattered. Back in the ballroom, Grace set down her tray in the service station. She flexed her fingers, took a breath, pulled herself together the way black women have been pulling themselves together in hostile rooms for 400 years. She didn't call anyone. She didn't complain. She picked up a fresh tray and walked back into the crowd. Ray watched her go. He whispered to himself, Lord, give that girl strength. He didn't know how much she was going to need. At the VIP table near the stage, the chair was still empty. The keynote speaker placard caught the light every time a server walked past. Elena Whitfield checked her phone for the 11th time. No message. No confirmation. Just an empty chair and a ticking clock. The second confrontation came 40 minutes into the gala. and this time, Dutton wasn't subtle about it. Grace was delivering the main course to table 6, grilled filet, roasted vegetables, plated with the kind of precision that costs $30 an ingredient. She set each plate down with practiced care, smiled at the guests, stepped back. Then Dutton appeared behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that the guests at table 6 stopped eating. "Empty your pockets." Grace turned slowly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. A piece of jewelry went missing from the coat check 20 minutes ago. You're the only one who's been moving through that area unsupervised." It was a lie. The coat check was staffed by hotel employees. Grace hadn't been within 50 feet of it all night. The guests at table 6 knew this. The hotel manager knew this. Anyone who'd been paying attention for more than 5 minutes knew this. But Dutton had a badge, and in America, a badge can turn a lie into a lawful order. "Captain, I haven't been near the coat check. You can verify that with hotel security." "I'm not asking hotel security. I'm asking you. Pockets. Now." Grace looked at the guests at table 6. 6 wealthy faces staring at their plates. Not one pair of eyes meeting hers. Not one voice rising to say what everyone already knew, that this had nothing to do with jewelry. She emptied her apron. Slowly. One item at a time. A pen. Her phone. A small notepad with catering shorthand. A tube of lip balm. She placed each item on the white tablecloth next to a plate of $40 filet. Dutton picked up each one, turned it over, examined it like evidence, then dropped it back on the table without a word. He picked up her phone last, held it, looked at the screen. Grace's jaw tightened. "That's my personal property. Everything on this table is subject to inspection." He put the phone down. The screen was dark, but 30 seconds ago, it had lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID read, "Dad." Dutton hadn't noticed, but one of the guests at table 6 had. She stared at the phone, then at Grace, then back at the phone. Something was connecting in her mind, but she couldn't quite reach it yet.
Dutton wasn't satisfied. He was never going to be satisfied. Because this was never about jewelry. It was about a black woman who carried herself with too much confidence in a room where he expected her to shrink. He straightened up and spoke loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I'm going to need you to come with me to the service hallway for a more thorough search. Standard procedure." There is no standard procedure for searching catering staff without a filed complaint. "Are you refusing a direct order from a police captain?" "I'm exercising my constitutional rights." The words hung in the air like smoke. Guests at 3 surrounding tables heard every syllable. Forks stopped. Conversations died. The ballroom was developing a gravity well, and Grace Sullivan was at the center of it. Elena Whitfield materialized from somewhere near the stage. Her face was flushed. Her clipboard trembled in her hands. "Captain, please, she's one of our best. Can we handle this quietly? The donors are watching." Dutton turned on her with a look that could crack glass. "Are you obstructing a security operation, ma'am? Because I can have you removed, too." Elena opened her mouth, closed it, took a step back, then another. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd like she'd never been there. Grace was alone. In the kitchen, Ray Brooks watched through the pass-through window. His whole body was rigid. He took one step toward the door. The cook next to him, a young man half his size, grabbed his arm with both hands. "Chef, don't! He'll arrest you on the spot. You know he will." Ray's eyes were wet. Not from sadness, from the kind of rage that has nowhere to go. The kind that black men learn to swallow before they learn to read.
"That's my baby girl out there," he said. "I know. And the best thing you can do for her right now is stay here." Ray didn't move. His hands shook at his sides. Dutton led Grace toward the service hallway. Every step was visible to the guests. He walked behind her, close, proprietary, like a man walking a prisoner. Grace's back was straight. Her chin was up. She would not give this room the image of a broken woman. The hallway was colder. Fluorescent lights, concrete floor. The glamour of the ballroom disappeared the moment they crossed the threshold. This was the part of the hotel that guests weren't supposed to see. The part where the work happened. The part where people like Grace existed before they became invisible servers in black uniforms. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." On what charge? Suspicion of theft and failure to comply with a lawful security directive. You haven't identified any stolen property. You haven't filed an incident report. You haven't contacted hotel security to confirm the alleged theft. "Captain, I'm a third-year law student. I know what probable cause requires, and this isn't it." For the first time all night, something flickered in Dutton's eyes. Not doubt, not guilt, annoyance. The kind of annoyance a man feels when the person he's trying to break won't break. "You can file a complaint tomorrow. Right now, you're being detained." Click. The handcuffs closed around her wrists. Cold steel against warm skin. The left cuff pressed directly against her mother's gold bracelet. The metal bit into the delicate chain. Grace's eyes closed for 1 second. Just one. When they opened, they were clear. From the hallway entrance, a voice rang out. Not a whisper, not a murmur, a declaration. "Thank goodness someone is finally taking security seriously." Diane Prescott, 61 years old, pearl necklace, Chanel dress, founding donor of the Children's Hope Foundation. She stood at the hallway entrance with a champagne glass in her hand and a smile on her face, performing for the small crowd that had gathered to watch. Several guests nodded along. A few others looked away in shame. The crowd was splitting, and the ones who stayed silent were just as guilty as the ones who spoke. Grace said nothing. She stood with her hands behind her back, cuffed in a service hallway, and she looked at Diane Prescott with an expression that would haunt that woman for the rest of her life. Not anger, not hatred, recognition. As if Grace had seen that face 1,000 times before, on 1,000 different women, in 1,000 different rooms. Then 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, Officer Calloway stepped away from Dutton and walked to the far end of the hallway. He pulled out his phone. His fingers were shaking so badly he misdialed twice before getting through. When the line connected, he whispered 4 words. "Sir, you need to come." Second, outside the hotel, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the main entrance. No sirens, no lights. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. A man in a dark suit stepped onto the sidewalk. He buttoned his jacket once, adjusted his lapel pin. Then he walked toward the entrance with the kind of stride that clears a path without asking. Third, Elena Whitfield, standing near the ballroom stage, looked down at her event program. Her eyes moved from the empty VIP table to the hallway where Grace was handcuffed. Her lips moved as she read the keynote speaker's name. Then she read it again. Then her face turned the color of chalk. She looked at the hallway. She looked at the program. She connected the 2 pieces of information that every person in this building had missed. The keynote speaker's last name was Sullivan. The handcuffed waitress's last name was Sullivan. Elena's clipboard hit the floor. On Grace's phone, still sitting on the table at Station 6, where Dutton had left it after inspection, the screen lit up one more time. Dad. Missed call. 3. The clock was down to minutes now. And Captain Vince Dutton, standing in a service hallway with his hand on a pair of handcuffs he should never have touched, had no idea what was coming. He was about to find out. The ballroom doors didn't swing open. They were pulled open by hotel staff with the kind of deliberate formality reserved for heads of state. 2 men in suits stepped through first, scanning the room with trained eyes. Then the man himself entered. Commissioner Nathaniel Sullivan, 58 years old, 6'3", shoulders that could carry the weight of a city, and had. His dark suit was impeccable. His Metropolitan Police lapel pin caught the chandelier light. His shoes clicked on the marble floor with a rhythm that made people stop talking before they even knew why. He was the first black commissioner in the history of the D.C. Metropolitan Police. 30 years on the force, decorated 12 times. The man who cleaned up the 4th District. The man who testified before Congress on police reform and made senators squirm in their seats. The man who every officer in this city either admired or feared. Tonight, he was supposed to deliver a keynote speech about the future of community policing. Instead, he was about to discover his daughter in handcuffs. Elena Whitfield reached him first. She was shaking. Her words tumbled out in fragments. Something about a captain, a waitress, a misunderstanding, the service hallway. She couldn't form complete sentences. Her hands fluttered like trapped birds. Commissioner Sullivan listened. His face didn't change. Not a muscle. Not a twitch. But something behind his eyes shifted. A stillness that any veteran officer would recognize immediately. It was the calm before an earthquake. "Where?" he said. One word. That was all Elena needed. She pointed toward the service hallway. He walked. The crowd parted. Not because anyone told them to, because something in the way he moved made standing in his path feel dangerous. Guests stepped aside the way water parts for the bow of a ship. Whispers rippled outward. Phones came out. Someone near table 3 said, "That's the commissioner." Councilwoman Patricia Moore lowered her phone for the first time in 20 minutes. She'd been recording since the credential check. Now, she watched Nathaniel Sullivan cross the ballroom, and her political instincts told her something historic was about to happen. She hit record again. The commissioner turned the corner into the service hallway. 2 fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The concrete floor was cold. The glamour of the ballroom vanished, and there was Grace. His Grace. His baby girl. His daughter who refused his money and worked double shifts and carried her mother's bracelet like a shield against a world that never stopped testing her. She was standing with her hands behind her back, steel cuffs around her wrists. Her mother's gold bracelet, the one his wife had worn every day for 22 years, was pinched between metal and skin. A red mark was already forming where the chain dug into her wrist. Her uniform was still perfect. Her posture was still straight. Her eyes were dry. That's what broke him. Not the handcuffs, not the hallway. The fact that his daughter had trained herself not to cry in moments like this. That she had been in enough moments like this to develop the skill. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. No voiceover, no dialogue, no sound except the fluorescent lights buzzing and the distant murmur of 300 people holding their breath. Father and daughter, staring at each other across 10 feet of concrete floor. Then Grace spoke. "Hi, Dad." 2 words. They landed like a grenade in a library. Dutton heard them first. His brain processed them second. His face processed them third. And that's where the show started. The blood left his cheeks in stages, like someone was draining him from the inside out. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Dad," she said. "Dad." He turned and looked at Commissioner Sullivan for the first time. Really looked. And the recognition hit him like a freight train in slow motion. The lapel pin, the suit, the 2 plainclothes officers flanking him, the face he'd seen in department bulletins, on the evening news, in the framed portrait hanging in every precinct in the city. His commanding officers, commanding officers, commanding officer. The man who controlled every badge, every promotion, every disciplinary hearing in the entire Metropolitan Police Department. And he had just called his daughter a dirty black dog and put her in handcuffs. Dutton tried to speak. What came out was barely human. "Commissioner Sullivan, sir. This is a routine security. There was a report of, take the cuffs off my daughter." 7 words, spoken at a volume just above a whisper. They carried more authority than anything Dutton had ever said in 24 years with a badge. The word daughter detonated. It traveled from the hallway to the ballroom in seconds. Diane Prescott's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Elena Whitfield covered her mouth with both hands. A gasp moved through the crowd like a wave, growing louder as it spread. Dutton's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't find the key on his belt. It took him 3 attempts to unlock the cuffs. 3 attempts while the commissioner watched. 3 attempts while Grace stood perfectly still and let him fumble. The cuffs came off. Grace brought her hands forward slowly. She rubbed her right wrist first, then her left, the one with the bracelet. The gold chain had left an impression in her skin, a thin red line in the shape of her mother's love. She didn't step toward her father. She didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She looked at him and held his gaze, and in that look was everything she couldn't say in front of these people. "I'm okay. I handled it. I didn't call you on purpose. The system should work without a phone call to the commissioner." He understood, because she was his daughter, and she was exactly like him. Then Commissioner Sullivan turned to face Captain Dutton, and the hallway became a courtroom. "Captain, explain to me, in front of every person within earshot, the probable cause that justified placing handcuffs on a credentialed service worker at a charity event." Dutton swallowed. "Sir, there was a report of missing jewelry from the coat check." "Was there? Show me the report." Silence. "Show me the victim's statement." Silence. "Show me the incident number you logged before initiating a search and detention." Silence. The commissioner took 1 step forward. Just 1. But it closed the distance between them in a way that made Dutton step backward into the wall. "I've reviewed your record, Captain. 3 excessive force complaints in 6 years, all 3 involving civilians of color, all 3 buried by your division commander. That pattern ends tonight." He turned to address the crowd now packed into the hallway entrance. Phones raised, red recording lights blinking. Patricia Moore in the front row, steady as stone. What happened in this hallway is not an isolated incident. It is a system failure. Captain Dutton bypassed every protocol this department has built over 30 years of reform. He conducted a search without probable cause. He fabricated a theft report to justify a detention. He physically restrained a civilian who had committed no crime, violated no law, and posed no threat. He paused, looked at Dutton, then at Grace, then at the crowd. And he did all of this to the only black server in this room, while a white server shattered a glass 10 feet from him without receiving so much as a glance. That is not security. That is profiling. And in my department, profiling is not a policy. It is a fireable offense. The silence was total. 300 people. 0 sound. Then, Councilwoman Moore stepped forward. Commissioner, I witnessed the entire interaction from the beginning. Captain Dutton conducted an unprovoked credential check on Miss Sullivan within minutes of her entering the ballroom. He ignored an identical incident involving a white server. I have the full sequence on video. She held up her phone. The screen glowed. Then a second voice, younger, shaking. Officer Trent Calloway stepped out from behind 2 guests. His face was pale. His hands were clasped in front of him to keep them from trembling. Sir, I need to report something. Every eye shifted to him. There was no jewelry report. No theft was called in. No victim came forward. Captain Dutton instructed me to, his exact words were, find a reason to remove her. I followed that order. I shouldn't have. I should have reported it immediately. I failed. The room erupted. Not in applause, in the sound of 300 people exhaling shock at the same time. Murmurs became voices. Voices became accusations. Diane Prescott tried to slip toward the exit. Someone blocked her path. Not physically, just by staring at her until she stopped moving. Dutton wheeled on Calloway. His face was crimson. You're done, Calloway. You hear me? I will end your... Captain Dutton. The commissioner's voice cut through the noise like a surgeon's blade. Calm, precise, final. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge and service weapon to Officer Calloway right now. You will report to Internal Affairs at 0800 tomorrow morning. Failure to appear will result in an arrest warrant. Do you understand these instructions? Dutton's hand moved to his badge. It hovered there. For 24 years, that badge had been his identity, his authority, his armor. It had let him walk into any room and decide who mattered and who didn't. It had let him grab a woman's wrist and call her a dog, and believe he was the one keeping order. He unclipped it. The sound was small, a tiny metallic click, barely louder than a whisper. But in that hallway, it sounded like a career hitting the floor. He placed the badge in Calloway's open palm, then his weapon. Calloway's hand closed around both. He didn't look at Dutton. He couldn't. The commissioner turned to Grace. The courtroom dissolved. The crowd disappeared. The cameras stopped mattering. It was just a father looking at his daughter. Are you hurt? No, sir. He looked at her wrists, at the red marks where steel had pressed against gold, at the bracelet that his wife had clasped around her own wrist every morning for 22 years, and that now bore the imprint of a pair of handcuffs that should never have existed. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. He blinked once, controlled it, held it. You handled that with more grace than most officers I've ever commanded. She almost smiled. The almost was the whole story, because a full smile would have meant this was over, and it wasn't over. It would never be fully over. But this moment, right here, was a start. I learned from the best, she said. The applause began at the back of the hallway. One person, then 5, then 50, then every person in earshot. Not polite applause, not the kind you give a keynote speaker. The raw, unfiltered, full-body release of a room full of people who had just watched something true happen in a world drowning in performance. Grace stood in the center of it, hands free, back straight, her mother's bracelet on her wrist catching the light. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She just stood there and let the room see her. Fully, completely, for the first time all night. Not as a server, not as a suspect, not as a victim. As Grace Sullivan, law student, daughter, the woman who stood her ground when every system in the room told her to kneel. Man, this makes my blood boil. Imagine standing there, handcuffed, humiliated, for the crime of being black in a fancy room. 300 people watching, nobody saying a word. If her father hadn't walked in, Dutton walks free. Again. Think about that. The consequences came fast, faster than Dutton could have imagined, faster than he deserved. Within 48 hours, the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department filed formal charges against Captain Vince Dutton. Unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, filing a false security report, conduct unbecoming an officer. 4 charges, 24 years on the force, and it took one night to undo all of it. His 3 prior excessive force complaints, the ones his division commander had quietly buried in a filing cabinet, were reopened. Each one involved a civilian of color. Each one followed the same pattern. A confrontation manufactured from nothing, escalated by Dutton, then papered over with vague language and missing documentation. The pattern was so consistent, it could have been a training manual. A training manual for everything policing should never be. The police union reviewed his case. They looked at the video from Councilwoman Moore's phone. They listened to Officer Calloway's sworn statement. They read the incident report that didn't exist, because Dutton had never filed one. Then they did something they almost never do. They declined to represent him. Dutton was suspended without pay. His desk was cleared by noon the next day. His nameplate was removed from his office door. 24 years of service, and the only thing left behind was a rectangle of clean paint where the nameplate used to be. The missing jewelry, the entire foundation of Dutton's manufactured case, was found 30 minutes after the incident. A guest had left a pearl bracelet in the pocket of her coat at the coat check. The attendant had logged it in the lost and found drawer upon arrival. It had never been stolen. It had never been missing. It had been exactly where it was supposed to be the entire time. Just like Grace. Diane Prescott's reckoning came from the internet, and the internet does not forgive. Cell phone footage of her standing at the hallway entrance, champagne in hand, smile on face, saying, "Thank goodness someone is finally taking security seriously," while a black woman stood in handcuffs behind her, went viral within 6 hours. 14 million views in 3 days. Her name trended on every platform. The Children's Hope Foundation board held an emergency session and removed her by unanimous vote. Her PR team released a statement calling her words taken out of context. The context was a 15-second video. There was no other context to take. Officer Trent Calloway requested a transfer the morning after the gala. He didn't want a promotion. He didn't want